Alrighty, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our 10th episode of the Sperging Out Podcast. My name is Mitch Grace. I am the author of the book Growing Up with Asperger's Lessons Learned and Shareable Wisdom in audiobook, paperback, and Kindle formats, all on Amazon and available right now. Links in the description, and joined, as always, by my co-host extraordinaire.
Hello, happy to be here. I am an autism therapist, and I primarily work with teenagers and adults, and I do in-home therapy.
Thank you as always for joining me. And so we've been behind the scenes. My co-host extraordinaire and I have been looking to spice up the not spice up the content, but go into other adventures and to see what else can we talk about on this podcast. And a topic that we were going to have to discuss inevitably was the TV show Love on the Spectrum, and we decided to save it for our 10th episode. While my co-host, as he will soon explain, has seen both Australian and American versions, in this episode we will be discussing just the American version, specifically the first episode, because that's all I have seen.
Yes, okay. In my defense, my boss would not stop telling me about the Australian version of the show, and that's why I watched it. Fair. And in my defense, I did not like it. I liked some of the people on the show, but the show itself was gross.
Yes, I guess we're just going to get right into it, and it's the show from... There are definitely points in episode 1 of the US version of Love on the Spectrum where it didn't really come across as like a documentary. It came off like
a reality TV show.
Like a zoo. And like a carnival freak scenario. Okay, let's get into it. So the first person that the show covers is a woman named Danny, who has her own animation studio and whatnot.
Highly successful.
Yes.
Very ambitious and motivated.
She has won the Temple Grandin Award, which I was hoping she would go into a bit more detail on the award she's won, but she didn't go into that one specifically because Temple Grandin Award, that's a big deal.
Yeah,
that's a huge deal.
Crazy.
So. But okay, so the first note I have, and this one generally made me pause, press pause, and I had to ask myself, if the entire show is going to be like this, I'm going to blow a gasket. But it's so. Her aunt and uncle, who she lives with, brought up a story of how when she was younger, to practice kissing, she would just practice on a cupcake.
Oh, yeah.
And that, to me, I was so insulted by that, because it's like, why in the utter editor, I am sorry, producer, I'm sorry, you're gonna need to interject a lot of bleeps, because we're swearing to this one, because this show pisses me off. Why on earth would you bring that up? You can tell by her facial reaction that she's very clearly embarrassed by the story. Her whole posture, her face, everything changes, and they just keep going on and on about the cupcake, and they essentially goad her into demonstrating.
In the show's defense, I mean, okay, so it's very clear that the segments with the parents are scripted interviews. They have questions that they intentionally are bringing up with the parents, so the parents can tell specific stories. This is all pre-set up. Mm-hmm. Almost certainly. In the show's defense, though, Danny kind of plays along with the joke, and they don't goad her into like faking it. She does it on purpose, and it's kind of funny because it makes her uncle uncomfortable, and then they kind of make fun of him for being, a prude.
Yeah,
and I mean, I do agree that the story is embarrassing, but it is also somewhat entertaining. What I found more embarrassing is at the beginning is that they ask every single one of them immediately, like, "Have you ever been on a date?" And they're always like, no. Have you ever had anyone in your room? No. And it's like, okay, you don't have to like bully them. Like, you can ask them if they've ever been on a date, but they like double down on making them like they've never ever had a girlfriend or a boyfriend. And you're like, yeah, that's really shit. Like, hammer that point home. It's mean.
Yeah, they ask these,
and they look sad.
Yeah, and they ask these people, "Are you looking for love?" I'm just like, they're looking for love. The show is on Love on the Spectrum. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's weird. They ask them all, like, do you want to date? And you're like, yeah, why else would they be on the show?
That's so dumb.
Silly question.
So the main note I put for Danny's first section was, like, the vibe I got from it was like, have you ever seen that Spider-Man meme where it's Spider-Man from the 60s and he's pointing with two other cops who are also laughing, and the caption is typically, look at him and laugh. That's the whole vibe I got with Danny's first section, and like I said earlier, I paused and asked myself, if this is how the entire show is going to be, I'm gonna lose it.
That is how the show is. The music is like this. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like stock, upbeat, silly music all the time, constantly.
Like
and you're
shit
like,
you hear on a sitcom.
And it just feels like demeaning when you listen to it. You're like, why are they playing this music like this? It makes it seem just like, haha, aren't they so dumb? And you're like, please stop.
It's trying to come off as whimsical, but it's just not.
Yeah, that's it. It's like this faux whimsy that just like seems insulting, like they live in another dimension. It's like, they're just like functioning adults, like especially Danny.
Yeah.
She opened her own animation studio at 14, got an amazing award, and teaches people how to do animation. Like, she's clearly a very capable and intelligent person. So do not talk down to her.
Yeah.
That was another thing. All of the parents and all of the staff involved talk to them like this. Yeah. Oh my God, Danny, how are you doing? Like, they talk like they're talking to children. Yo, Danny's an adult. Everyone on this show is an adult. Why are they talking to
20s and 30s?
Don't talk down to people with autism.
Yeah.
They're normal people. They can tell when you're talking down to them. It's just insulting.
Exactly. And so moving right along. So that's Danny, and then Abby. Our first stint with Abby. So some observations I made is that her stuffed animals, she has a lot of them, as well as Disney princess dolls. I noticed that everything was in a certain order, in a straight line, in a certain way, with the exception of like one pile of stuffed animals, which you can see out in the corner. And same with like the princess doll accessories and whatnot. They were, not only were they all in a specific order, but they were also very easy to access.
Yes, there was a scene where she picked up, I think, the Moana doll, and she like stroked its hair and then particularly put it back exactly where she picked it up from, and they're lined up in a row, which does not look like the way you would place them if you were displaying them or playing with them. It was definitely like a OCD kind of thing. My impression, this is all armchair psychology, so not professional opinion, but based on my professional knowledge, she has very bad anxiety, ADHD, and a little bit of OCD. Definitely the anxiety though. Because the reason she likes all the stuff that she liked when she was like a little kid, and why she has all those toys and stuffed animals, is because they're comforting. Because those are things that comfort her as a kid. Oh. And she is clearly quite anxious in all of the interviews and talking. And they don't address it. Like, her anxiety is part of why she has a hard time responding or staying on topic. And they don't really seem to notice or care. They kind of double down on asking her questions and making her a little uncomfortable sometimes, and it made me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, no one's going to be comfortable with like 10 people standing around you with a camera shoved in your face, but still, it was just weird.
Yeah, again, like there are specific instances where Abby, or she said, she identifies with Ariel, the Disney princess, because she, in the movie, she can't talk, and Abby says in real life there are times where I can't get my words out, and I'm just like, I feel that.
Yeah.
I completely get what she's saying. And to your point about her anxiety, I was like, I didn't even notice that. Like, it did strike me like, yeah, she's clearly nervous, but like I did not pick up on the whole anxiety angle of it, and about her, her love of all things Disney and all, and how that comforted her. That I didn't pick up on that at all. So
yeah, oftentimes
that explains a few things.
When adults are attached to things they loved as a kid when they're on the autism spectrum, it's because they're an anxious person, and those things give them that comfort, that safety net. And then also just like ADHD and anxiety tend to coincide, especially with individuals with autism, because that's why they think so quickly, is because they're constantly anxious.
Yeah, no, more on that topic a little bit later.
Yeah, can we talk about that? What was that lady called? The autism
Jennifer
coach?
Yeah,
is that what they called her? Yeah, I hated that lady.
Oh, really?
I mean, I didn't hate her. That's a little harsh, but she takes a grown ass woman, sits her on the floor, and then rolls balls to her to explain how conversations work. To be clear, Abby knows how conversations work. She has ADHD. It's hard for her to stay on topic. She gets anxious during a conversation. That is, rolling a ball towards someone is not going to teach them how to have a conversation.
Okay.
Especially when you do it for like 6 seconds and go, guess what you had, Abby? A conversation just now. Congratulations. And then you leave. I know the show is edited, so I'm sure that woman was there for more than 5 minutes, like the show kind of makes it look like. But even then, the activity or the exercise they did is something you would do with a child, not with a grown adult. With a grown adult, you explain to them how conversation rules work. The things that we all kind of socially understand automatically or pick up, you just explain it with words. So like you explain, hey, after you say something, give a pause for the other person to respond. Try not to change the subject. Try to respond to what they said. And always try to ask them questions about them instead of making statements about yourself unless they're asking you a question. You know, explain those things. Don't just go, I'm going to roll a ball at you, so you have to pause between sentences. That's not helpful.
Okay, I actually disagree.
Oh.
Yes, I actually disagree. To your point about, I don't think Jennifer talked down to Abby. I can see why you'd think that in her tone and whatnot, but I personally don't think so. I do agree with your point that it's edited to make it make the whole series of exercises 6 seconds. I do agree with you there. And granted, we don't know much about any previous therapies that Abby has done.
True, yeah.
But my disagreement is with the exercises they did. I actually think they were actually clever in the sense that, so for those who haven't seen the show, this woman takes a speech bubble like you'd see in a comic book or anything visual, and she drew on it, and she asked Abby, "What are your?"
Oh yeah, I have no problem with that part.
What are your? What do you like to talk about? And then, hey, you need to. She physically draws a section on the speech bubble that you need to ask them to give them stuff to talk about.
Yeah, you need to leave room in the conversation for them to talk about themselves.
Yes, but the ball exercise I disagree with because, again, we don't know about Abby's previous therapies, but this is a hands-on exercise to where what the other person is perceiving is now, you're essentially multitasking, which kind of what a conversation is. So it's another way for Abby to process, oh, hey, this is what it feels like to be bombarded with questions and whatnot. And then it puts a physical element into it. There's a motion to it. You can get a rhythm going, the ball back and forth. And so there is this. So I think it's another way to kind of tether their understanding of how a conversation is supposed to flow into a more tangible, physical thing they can interact with to help them process it.
Yeah, I understand that it's an example of how a conversation works and showing how someone can be overwhelmed by being shotgunned a bunch of questions really quickly. My only argument is that in the real world, when Abby's having a conversation, no one's going to be rolling balls at her. Like, you need to, like, that's the main thing in my line of work, is that programs need to be generalized. You can't do something that works great in the setting but not in the real world. It has to be translatable. So like the ball thing is a good like opener and good being like, see, this is what it feels like. But you can't just be like, there, you had a conversation, you're ready for your date tomorrow, and then leave. Like, that's not going to help her on the date. Yeah. She isn't going to think about those balls on the date, and if she does, it's not going to actually help her. It may distract her.
Yeah, again, the show's editing. Yeah,
it's hard to know, like, because they introduce this woman as if it's the first time she's there, and then she's there for like 2 minutes and then leaves. Yeah, and it's like, I hope this is not the first time this woman's met this family. Right. Otherwise, it's like it was a bit for the show.
Yeah, and then it feels like this exercise is something that this lady Jennifer would do with a client at first, and then at a certain point she would say like, okay, we're not doing we're not using the balls anymore. You're not going to roll to me. You have to ask me questions and whatnot.
Most to least prompting, where you give less of a prompt for conversation.
Yes, or you have to recognize the prompts yourself as opposed to having it like having something tangible to latch onto.
Yeah,
and it does. Again, this is just me thinking, but whenever Jennifer said, hey, you just had a conversation, like when Abby reacted to it, that did seem genuine. Abby's reaction did seem genuine, and when I saw that, I'm like, oh God, I know it's like I almost teared up a bit because I knew exactly how that light bulb moment felt. I know exactly how that felt because there are several times throughout my own life where talking with people was just so, like, I distinctly remember in elementary and middle school, like, I would try to talk to people and other people that they would just give me one-word answers. Like, oh, how are you? Good. Oh, what do you think of class today? Are you doing anything this weekend? Nothing. And that's it.
You're given no platform to continue the conversation.
Yes, and then it wasn't until high school where it really wasn't until my first my freshman year of high school, where one of my classmates, there was a genuine back and forth, and I had a much bigger reaction than what Abby had, but I do know what the light bulb moment feels like, because it's like, oh, this is how it's supposed to go.
Yeah,
it feels natural. I feel natural. That's that whole, again. If I hope that reaction was genuine. If not, I fucking hate the show even more. But
I mean, I'm sure her reaction is genuine. I don't think any of the individuals who are on the spectrum are. I mean, they're coached a little bit clearly, but they're not like scripted or anything. They're all clearly real people.
Yes.
I guess the other thing with Abby is that like before that they show her having a conversation with the gay couple who live in her backyard.
Yeah.
That's how they describe it, and I'm like, no, you need to explain more. You just said they live in the shed in the backyard. That's a little weird.
The guest, yeah, they said that
you rent it out to like some family friends, I think is what the show is implying.
Yeah.
But they have a dinner conversation, and she seems to be able to have like a genuine conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Her ability to stay on topic's a little rough, but she was responding in a timely manner to their statements and clearly listening to what other people were saying.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, the eye contact. She was kind of looking everywhere else.
Oh, yeah. She struggles a lot with eye contact. That was definitely one of her primary social issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I do chalk that up to anxiety because, like, every once in a while she'd be looking at something else that's clearly gotten her attention, but a lot of times she's just averting her eyes from the other person's eyes.
Averting. That's a good way to put it, because there were, averting. That's good. That's good. So like my notes I took were in order of how they appeared in the episode.
Yeah, because they introduce all three individuals.
Yes.
And then they jump to two of their dates. The James, he just didn't get a date in the first episode.
Yeah, fuck him,
it just didn't happen. He went out. He talked to his brother.
Yes. So speaking of James, that's who we were introduced to next after Abby. I know we did skip ahead a bit to when Abby and Jennifer, the autistic specialist Jennifer, comes in, but we're going to circle back to James here. So something I noticed about James immediately was that he would smile at the end of his sentences, and that was the most forced emotion I've ever seen. And not that I'm forced in the sense that I imagine James has been told by his parents or by previous therapists previously that it's like, hey, you sound very monotone. You need to you should smile whenever you're speaking. That way your voice in tone becomes more inflected and whatnot. And so it sounds like that therapy didn't quite work, because then James talks monotonely and very fast, and we'll get to that in a second. He talks very fast, very monotonely, and then he stops and then he smiles.
Yeah.
Like you need to smile while you are talking.
Yeah, I suspect because James has what we in the professional business call resting bitch face. So when he is not talking, he looks like he's annoyed or angry. Yeah. And that's just clearly his resting face. It's not how he's feeling. Mm-hmm. So most likely someone at some point told him to smile more. So he has to, like, when he's talking, he's not thinking about smiling. But when he finishes the sentence, he thinks, okay, better smile now. Mm-hmm. And, like, it takes a lot of training, effort, and just time to really learn to smile while talking and really emote. Because he does talk in a very monotone way. And if he, goes straight back to that resting face he has, it would look like he's annoyed at the conversation. When he's clearly not. He loves talking.
Yeah. And did he come across... To me, it struck me that his mouth was moving faster than his brain.
Yeah, he definitely talked quicker than he was thinking of what he was supposed to say. Mm-hmm. So he would go back and repeat the same thing, or he would trip over his words a lot, or do a lot of filler, like But that's pretty common with fast talkers, and common with neurotypical people too. Honestly. Yeah, I know people who talk like that.
Yes, same here.
And he was clearly excited. Like he was like. The first bit the show does is him showing off all the stuff, all the decorations in his bedroom to the camera crew, who then really shittily ask, have you ever actually talked about this stuff with anyone? Has anyone else ever seen it? And it's like, oh my God, what a rude question to ask. Like, I understand where that's coming from, but like, I have posters in my bedroom that I could tell you all about, but like only like 2 people have ever seen them, because like, I don't have my friends in my bedroom every time we hang out. I'm an adult. That's weird.
Yeah, it's pretty insulting.
Yeah, and he was clearly really excited about all this stuff, and the stuff was pretty neat. Honestly, I would have a conversation about it.
Yeah, rocks,
and then
swords, stamps.
After he's he's fangirling. I don't know. He's excited. He's going over this cool stuff. they immediately followed up with like, have you ever shown anyone this stuff though? And it's like, why would you ask that? That's so rude.
It's insulting.
It's so insulting. And he clearly looks super dejected and sad right afterward. And you're like, yeah, why would you do that?
Yeah, it's just
like, you don't have to put kid gloves on. You're talking to an adult, but at the same time, you don't have to be a jerk.
Yeah.
I wouldn't talk to anyone like that.
Seriously. Have you noticed how when he's talking, he often does and the da-da-da, and then the da-da-da. And then,
yeah, I
like
did.
he's sniffling almost.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it was just allergies, or do you think it was something else was bothering him?
It could be anything. I mean, it's hard to know. Like if it's allergies, there's no way to know.
And then, have you noticed how pauses, like when he talks with his parents, pauses aren't really a thing?
Yes, he's definitely the type you have to interrupt a lot because he will bogart the conversation if you don't. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely something that like I've worked on clients with, where it's as simple as just being like, okay, if you say a sentence, count to 3 in your head. Like just force them to count to 3 in their head, and then after a while they'll do it naturally without actually having to count to 3 in their head. Just make those pauses to allow the other people to talk.
Yeah,
he is an info dumper.
Yes, and then James's parents, James brings up that there's like a Renaissance fair or something coming up, and then his parents, I don't know if the documentary or the show made him do this, or if his parents just did this on his own.
The show made him do it.
Yeah, but like the point I was trying to get across is that like his parents like, oh hey, show him this, 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 and
that may also be like, because like that's clearly something James likes to do. Yeah. So his parents might be accustomed to like egging him on to be like, hey, show them this, show them this, show this, because like. Yeah, James clearly enjoys showing off these things.
Yeah, but James sounded so flustered by when he was prompted to do that. He just sounded flustered, like he didn't want to do it. Like
I think he was flustered because he had to go get it, and he was like, "Well, wait here while I go get it," because it's not like here.
Yeah, and then I also noticed that this is about he has a very interesting cadence.
Yeah,
he often, like when he was discussing what he wore to the Ren Fair, he says, "Oh yes, I'm going to wear this cape and something like as I often do," and I'm just like, what? Wait, hold on, what? And then he also had very similar sentence enders that come from something like a storybook. Not
yes, I have had a client that talks like a children's storybook, and we have to remind him to use his normal voice often. Mm-hmm. And I suspect it's similar with James, not to the same degree as my client, but it's very clear that he has picked up certain phrases and just like ways of speaking from things he's read or films he's watched. So he like you said, he ended with like as I want to do or as I am to do. Like he implies he wears his Ran outfit all the time, which I don't think he does. Yeah. I think that was just like a default. This is how I end a sentence, like learned behavior.
Right. And then so like there was a point where James's dad was saying, oh hey, to get a girlfriend you got to do this, hey, you're
gotta look attractive.
And like I don't understand why the that was included in the show, because every time the camera cut to James, also was at a weird fucking angle where he was like almost out of frame.
Yeah,
what was up with that?
The angle during that conversation was horrible. So this in the biz, I'm pretty sure this is a single camera show where everything is there's one camera on set and that's it.
Yeah.
Because there's multiple scenes where they're having a conversation or interviewing someone where the camera angle changes and the camera angle, you would see 2 cameras if the angle is legit. And I'm almost certain they cut the dialogue pieces together. Because there are so many interviews where they're talking to someone in one room, then they're in a different room, and they're still talking about the question. And it's like, no, they didn't walk across the house while explaining this. You clearly edited this to sound like it was one conversation when it wasn't.
Right. So, yeah, the editing, I'm sure we'll get into that.
We'll get that at the end, because the editing is the thing I hate easily the most. The thing that offends me the most.
And then the conversation, I don't know why James's dad is talking about this to James in the documentary. I genuinely don't know. But like James is clearly annoyed. He's clearly like he does not want to talk about this, because it's very clear that everything James's dad has told him he has heard before, and so he's just like yes, He's just trying to get the conversation over with.
Yeah. Well, in the show's defense, again, I think that might have been just James's dad.
Yeah,
because he's an older gentleman and he may be on the spectrum himself too. I mean, I'm just spitballing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like that is like advice that like generic parent advice where it's like you need to be more attractive. You need to cut your hair. It's too long. Especially with the age of James's dad. Yeah. He is definitely at that age where he thinks that having long hair on a man is not attractive to women. Like, that's his age.
Yeah.
So he was just trying to be helpful and advising. And obviously James is not having it because I'm sure he's heard it a billion times.
Yeah, and then the cameras are on, so he's probably a little extra nervous about this too. So he's trying. So the vibe I really got from James during that conversation was like James was trying to very politely tell his dad, up. I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah, I think, what does he say? He's like, I've heard this all before, or something like that.
He doesn't say something like this.
Says something.
He says like,
maybe to his mom.
I think he says, I know. I think he says something along the lines of that. But yeah, James. Okay, Info Dumper hasn't really mastered pauses and to the point.
I would hang out with James. He seems super cool.
I mean, he's very kind, and
dude, whenever he had a sword. And he got made at a run fair. I'm like, that's dope.
That is cool.
And all the stuff he was going on about in his bedroom, I was like, all these things are super cool. Mm-hmm. Even this, was it a stamp collection?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was like, the way he was describing it, I was like, okay, stamp collections are not cool, but you have sold me on this stamp collection. It's pretty cool.
Right. So that's James. We'll get back to him in a bit. And then we already talked about Abby's session with Jennifer, which... Yes. Oh God, it just dawned on me how much I hate the editing of the show, considering how much they jump back and forth. But
yeah, it's weird. Like, I really wish they stuck with one individual. You get to know them, then they go on their date, and then the next individual, instead of jumping between all three individuals and intermixing their dates in this weird way, where you're like, oh, it's so confusing.
Yeah, it unnecessarily jumps around a lot. But from James's first section, we then go to Danny's second section, and this is when she talks about her awards, her animation company.
Yeah, and she goes to the bar with her other friend who's on the spectrum.
Okay, this whole segment is pointless.
And scripted.
Yes, highly.
They walk into a bar that's empty except for her and him, and you're like, okay, this is fake. Like, why is the bar empty in the middle of the day in LA? Nah, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and then during the point where her autistic friend asks her, "Oh, so why haven't you found a date yet?" She says, "Oh, normal autistic people think I'm too motivated, and normal people think I'm too strange." I'm like, okay, the normal people section, yeah, sure.
I honestly believe that part because she is extremely goal oriented and motivated and go getter and doer.
Yeah,
and she explicitly says during the interviews she wants a guy who is also just like that. Who is very motivated, very business oriented, very career oriented, very successful, and that's a pretty high bar. I've had neurotypical chicks say similar things, and I've been like, oh well, I'm normal. Sorry, I'm not great. Yeah, I haven't said that, but you know what I mean. Like, it's intimidating when someone has those expectations, and they themselves are successful in the way they're describing. So it's not even like unfair expectations.
When you put it like that, yeah, that's very fair. That is very fair. So then, but yeah, the whole thing felt scripted. It felt fake. We are in.
Oh yeah.
It's. You know what? There's a word I'm gonna use. I can't believe it. I just dawned on me. Insincere. This whole show feels insincere, and we'll get into this once we wrap up and give our final thoughts. But
yeah, the dialogue between her and her friend was so unnatural feeling.
Yeah,
where I'm not going to say it was scripted outright, but it was definitely they were talking because they were in front of the camera and they wanted to I don't know, be that person on camera, and that's not how normal people talk.
Yes.
That was not how friends interact.
Yeah, seriously. That's not how friends on the autistic spectrum interact with each other. Our point is that, because I feel like some pushback we're going to get is oh, well, they're autistic. Of course their conversations aren't going to feel natural. No, the conversations feel unnatural even for autistic people.
Oh, yeah. We'll get into that. When we get to the end and we talk about the editing, they actively edit this to make them more awkward, and disgustingly so.
Yes. So yeah, the whole conversation with Danny, that's bullshit. So next we see Abby again without Jennifer. Okay, this one grinded my gears. So Abby's leaving for her date, and then when her and her mom are leaving, her mom kind of gets she's closing the door. Then she makes this face where it goes,
oh yeah, the mom makes this awful face at the camera, and you're like, yeah, that's so rude.
And
Abby didn't do anything weird. That was the part where Abby was just like, I want to look like a princess. I want to look good on my date. I feel like I look good. That's it. Very normal things to say before a date to your mother.
Yeah.
And for your mother to look back at the camera and go, ooh, What is wrong with again, I don't know if that's the show telling her to act that way or if she's acting it up for the show, but either way, it's like just rude.
Yeah, just with all that.
Like, if you want your daughter to have a good day, don't make it weird. Don't preemptively assume it's going to be bad.
Just this whole
yeah, it's got that reality show syndrome where everything's kind of dramatic and silly.
It was frustrating and insulting to watch that specific part, but
then it cuts to Abby on her date with, I forgot the guy's name.
I don't either, but it's at an animal preserve, I want to say.
Zoo, something like that.
Yeah, a miniature zoo, and
I mean, honestly, so the actual conversation between Abby and her date, whose name I can't remember, stilted but genuine. Like, they're talking about animals mostly because they both love animals, and that's a good match.
Yeah.
Her date had been to Africa, and earlier in the show, she said one of her dreams was to go to Africa or go to a cruise to Africa. So she was super jazzed about that.
And the guy said, "Oh, I've been to Africa a number of times."
Yeah, and he had made her a flamingo bracelet.
That felt fake.
I mean,
that felt fake.
So I don't know if that's the show because, real talk, mom and dad are like, "Hey, give her this gift during your date; it'll impress her." That's totally normal. I have clients where their parents have literally purchased a gift, given it to their son or daughter, and been like, "Okay, on your date, give this gift to the person." And that's and a lot of his dialogue was clearly scripted, but not in a TV show scripted sense. He has practiced what he is going to say.
Yeah.
And that is not unusual. That is very normal. If you struggle with social cues and social stuff, practicing what you're going to say beforehand might come across as stilted and out of place at times, but it's better than not knowing what to say at all, especially if you're nervous on a date.
The reason I think the flamingo thing was fake, it was just the editing. It felt insincere. It felt... It's like, oh, we need a dramatic and heartfelt moment. Here, give him a flamingo thing.
So let's talk about the actual date itself too.
Yes.
So they're just sitting and talking, and it's a little stilted, but in that natural sense. And then suddenly it gets really stilted, where there's massive pauses between everything they say.
Yeah,
and there's cuts. So you're like, okay, so this is clearly just the editor. The editor has put on the hokey, hoo-hoo, whimsical music, and then included these massive pauses with reaction shots of their facial expressions after every sentence. And it's clearly not what happened during the actual conversation.
Yeah.
It is clearly edited to make them seem way more awkward and way more stilted and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And they both went away from that date being like, that was a good date. I had a good time. So it's clearly the date did not go the way the show presents it.
Yeah, there's this one point where it's like, oh, hey, there's that bench. Let's sit down and enjoy this. And it's just this is so fake. They were told to say that. And then they sat on the bench and they, okay. And
then the lady from the zoo brings out an owl from the pet and you're like, okay, the producers and the show definitely set this all up.
Yeah, it was nice in the sense that we got genuine reactions from Abby, but oh, monkeys are so cute. And there were instances during this date where Abby was able to streamline not a perfect, but her genuine reaction came out seamlessly.
Yeah.
And it felt incredibly natural. So I'm like, oh, okay. So this is Abby in her not element, but it's she feels comfortable. She's like, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
When she's comfortable, her delivery or the way she speaks is a lot more natural. I don't want to say not autistic, but it's not stilted.
Yes.
It's not forced.
You can tell that the stilted conversation is natural and when it's edited in.
Yeah.
It's a day and night difference. You're like, okay, this is clearly the show doing this and not the actual conversation.
Yeah, and I just want to circle back to the bench thing because I have it written down, is that the whole thing was oh, we're going to sit on this bench. We're going to do that. That was not do people that go on dates sit on benches and whatnot? Yeah. Shoot, I've done that. But the way, and the fact that nobody else is at this zoo, are you kidding me?
That's another thing. Yeah, there's literally no one else there. And again, it's every time you're like, oh, this is fake.
So there's just, it's very...
But their date wasn't the most egregious one when it comes to the editing. It was definitely Danny's date afterward.
Which we'll get to.
Made me almost oh man, I was so annoyed.
Yeah, so yeah, Abby's date had some sincere moments, but the editing was shit. A lot of it felt fake, and I wish I remembered that guy's name because he sounded nice, and he regularly goes to Africa. That's cool.
Yeah, that's pretty dope.
And then, so from Abby's date, we then cut to James again,
Oh, yes.
And he's
having lunch with his brother.
Yes, and at one point he says, like, his brother asks him, "So what are you looking for in a woman?" I felt so bad for James because James says, "Oh, he just said, "Oh, I just want someone who's kind and nice to me." And he says, "Oh, well, he does say, "Oh, I want them to be attractive and whatnot," but
he gives like a very normal answer, like literally the normalest answer you could humanly give. It's like, I want someone who shares common interests with me, someone I like talking to, someone I find physically attractive, and then just like literally like the normal bar.
And then he makes it a point to emphasize, oh, someone who cares about me, who likes me, who loves me, and whatnot. And then he pauses afterwards, and then there is, to the show's credit, there is a bit of an editing work. They do let that moment sink in for a bit, and the note I made was like, wow, that's towards the end of when he's saying, he says, I think James says, that's not too much to ask. Like his voice, for there's a rare instance where his voice does inflect, but it inflects downwards.
Yeah.
So that tells me it's like, oh, this is something he genuinely feels, and he genuinely was wanting to know he's not asking too much, and I felt that.
Yeah, and I had hoped someone would say something in response, because like every once in a while you hear the camera guy or someone behind the camera talk. Yeah. And I was like, that's the part where you should chime in and be like, no, those are totally reasonable asks.
Yeah,
that's what everyone wants.
Yeah, it's just, I felt sad because it's just like, yeah, I get it that you're not asking for too much.
Yeah, don't make him feel bad because he wants someone who he finds attractive. Like that's normal. And
then I wrote this down. He didn't. When his brother prompted him with a question, and then James just didn't stop. Oh, yeah. He did not stop, and his brother was just like, oh wow, yeah, and I could tell that his brother was being nice, and like this is what he does whenever he talks with James.
Yeah,
but it's
still a little insulting.
Yeah, it's because
I suspect that's not the show. That's definitely just how the brother talks.
Yeah, because James's brother's clearly like, I'm not going to get a word in, so I'm just going to react anyway, just so I know that James is. So James knows that I'm interacting with them. Yeah. So
they gave him that advice about, in a conversation, don't talk too much, allow it to be a 50-50.
Yeah.
And I was like, 70-30, brother. 70-30.
I feel like 80-20.
Yeah.
And then James did ask for his brother's fries. Although he did not ask to dip the fries. I'm like, okay. That rubbed me rubbed me the wrong way a little bit.
I like the way he ate the fries, where he dipped them separately and then stuck them in his mouth separately. Like I thought he was going to do a walrus bit for a second, because that's what I would do, because I'm 12 deep down.
So it was overall just a nice conversation with James and his brother.
Really wasn't much there, yeah.
And nothing too egregious there. And then we
also James's shirt during that conversation was baller. It was a really cool shirt.
I'd have to look at
it. It was a button-up shirt. And it was striped, but each section of the shirt was a different color. It looked cool.
All right, well, just there. And then next, so cutting from there, we go to Abby's third section, where it's the second half of the date, which we've already kind of went over. I've already said the flamingo bracelet thing felt forced. The zoologist point of that was very Hollywood. That's not natural. That's not. Yeah. Unless you pay for like a VIP thing in certain zoos or certain animal enclosures, maybe you'll get that.
I mean, it's neat, but at the same time, it's like, when I'm on my date, I want it to be me and my date, and not me and my date and the lady who works at the zoo holding an owl.
Yeah, I mean, the only praise I'll give it is that we got genuine reactions from Abby and her date. It's like, okay, so this is them when they don't have to worry about or don't care about.
Was cool. I didn't know owls had twice as many bones in their neck as humans. I learned something.
Yeah, same here. And then at one point, so it cuts from James to Abby on her date, and they're still sitting on the bench, and Abby says, so the topic we're going to talk about is sea creatures. What are your favorites? And I was just like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, they absolutely fed her that topic.
Yeah.
Like she would not introduce that topic
exactly
unless someone told her to bring it up.
Yeah, fucking exactly. So, but yeah, we've already covered the date Abby went on. So then the show ends with Danny's third section, which is her date. So, co-host, please rip and tear.
Oh, God. Okay, so Danny's third date is at like a ritzy upstairs balcony bar in LA.
Yeah, downtown Los Angeles.
She is seeing a guy called Solomon, who is also on the spectrum, who works on communication with other individuals on the spectrum. And he's a real hippie type, loves good vibes, keeps talking about good vibes. Sorry, on a personal note, I hate that. Like, no offense to Solomon, but like, if you got to talk about how much you like good vibes all the time, it's like, okay, we get it. Like, positivity is cool and all, but like,
yeah, it's
if you pressure someone to being positive, it's not really positivity anymore.
Let me ask you: Solomon's autism seemed more mild compared to what else we've seen.
Yes, that may be because his primary focus is communication. Though.
Yeah, that I was thinking that too.
He was pretty freaking eloquent. He knew how to talk, and if that's what he does for a living, then obviously he's going to be very good at communicating.
Yes.
And I mean, honestly, Danny's also very high functioning, and like
very. She owns her own company.
Super successful, yeah. And her communication is pretty straightforward, just a little fast, a little too blunt. Yes, a little too honest. She's got that very businessy outlook on things, where she's like, "I will tell you exactly the truth, even if I really shouldn't." Like at the beginning, she was telling her parents that she wants to marry a guy with lots of money.
Yeah, she flat out.
And her parents are like, "You're being a bit of a gold digger," and she's like, "Yeah." And I was like, based. Actually, though, she's honest because everyone wants to marry someone with more money than let's not lie. And she's just being honest about it.
Like I literally, when I saw that, when I was watching the episode live, I literally texted you saying, "Wow, this woman just admitted to being a gold digger."
Based.
But I mean, I do admire her honesty, so there's that.
Yeah. I love that her parents tried to like shame her for it, and she just was like, "No."
She didn't care.
Did not care.
But back to her date with Solomon.
Back to this date. So the very opening, they introduce each other, and then there's this massive pause. I mean, I felt years of my life disappear during this pause. And it was so clearly edited. Like, this entire date, every time one of them says something, there's 1,000 freaking year pause. And you're like, why? There's clearly not an actual pause in their conversation. They also keep cutting back to Solomon talking about good vibes, and it's like, I don't think he mentioned good vibes every single sentence. I don't believe you, show. I don't think he was like, good vibes. I like good vibes. By the way, I teach communication, but I mostly put good vibes out there. He did not say that every sentence. You edited out the stuff in between to make him seem like he was hyper fixated on this one thing. Because...
And then as the day goes on, and Danny finds out she has a lot in common with Solomon.
Also, that's another thing. Sorry, not to cut you off.
No worries.
As their date goes on, their drinks come out.
Yeah.
And their drinks come out so quickly.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, they've only been on the date for like 30 seconds. Their drinks are already here. Oh, you also they didn't order drinks. Oh, okay. So they literally cut out like a half of this date. That was the one thing I like if their drinks are coming out that quickly, because there are other people in this location. This is not a stage location.
Although they are, like, their table is like towards the end of the patio.
I'm betting the camera crew is like, hey, can we have the corner table and then like have everyone kind of stay out of the shot? Which makes sense. If you're shooting a show, you got to do that.
That's fair.
But like that point and reason, or my point is that like if the drinks are coming out and you never saw them order them and they're coming out within like 30 seconds of the date starting, there's clearly a huge chunk of this date that is just not in the show, that has been edited out, of them talking and interacting and ordering drinks and stuff. So that's just one thing, like a point of evidence.
Yes. And then how the co-host, Sherna, do you want us to talk about how the date ends?
Yeah. So Danny at one point says she wants to go to the bathroom and then gets up and then she does an interview with the camera crew. But she's like not far away from the table where they're doing the date. And I was like, like Solomon's sitting right over there.
And what does she say to the camera crew?
She's going on about how pretty he is and how cool he is and how she likes him, and then she slips in that she loves him in the middle of like talking. And the camera crew's like, whoa, what'd you just say? And she's like, I love him. And then they just let her go back to the table. Like, they don't say like, hey, don't say that, by the way. That's too much. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's weird. Like, I understand like you want them to just go on a natural date, but at the same time, like, give them at least a little advice. Like, they're on the show. You don't want to watch them crash and burn, do you? But I think they do. That's kind of what it feels like.
And then what happens after the interview's over?
She goes back to the date and starts talking, and then she tells him she loves him.
And then what does Solomon do?
He gets really uncomfortable and says he needs to take a moment, and then gets up and walks off. And like, it's super awkward. He like looks over at the camera guy and like waves at him. He says like, I need to go take a break. And like, the show frames it like, oh, I need to leave because I'm super uncomfortable and I just don't want to, I got the ick. I got to go. And he walks away and she looks super sad and the interviewer talks to her and she's like, I may have laid it on too thick and scared him away. But here's the thing. I watched the second episode as well. He comes right back to the table and they continue their date and it's actually a really lovely date and they have a great time. The show ends.
Wait, are you fucking kidding me?
I am not kidding you. The show ends, cuts the episode there to make it look like she scared him away with the love thing, even though that is almost entirely manufactured. I mean, I'm not going to say entirely manufactured. He probably did get like really anxious and be like, I got to go take a breather moment and then come back. But like, the show makes it seem like that's where the date ends and he just never comes back. He does come back, and they continue to have the date afterward. In episode 2.
Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah, I watched episode 2 as well.
I did not watch episode 2.
But yeah, that's like the peak of like, this is manufactured reality TV shit that I do not like.
Okay.
I find it insulting. I get that you have to have some kind of drama to keep people watching, but when you put it all together, the music, the way they cut the conversations to make them seem more autistic or more awkward or more socially inept than they actually are, it just all comes back to feeling exploitative. Yeah, and like I get like there's some positives of the show of putting people with autism out there, showing that autism is very varied, each individual is very different, and showing the struggles that they face trying to meet people who match their energy or their, who they are. But at the same time, the show also has its cake and eats it too, where it's like, oh, we're doing this great positive thing, but we're also framing it in a way to kind of poke fun or exploit these people to make them seem more awkward than they are, to get laughs. And the music, it's just, I hate to use this word because I try not to use it. It feels ableist. Genuinely.
Yeah, so we're getting to our general thoughts of the show now, and now that we've recapped the first episode, and or at least from what we've seen, specifically of the American version. I'm sure we'll talk about the Australian version on a different time, but upon hearing, for this is happening live, upon hearing that they cut the date and then resumed in episode 2, like I should be like absolutely livid. I should be screaming into this microphone, but I'm just not. Like I'm just heartbroken because it's the show. Like I said it earlier, the show is insincere. Like the intent does not match the execution. Like with Abby and Danny's dates, like if you want to genuinely have a show about autistic people going on dates, you can't shove a camera in their face or have a camera within visual distance. You need to do like almost a hidden camera format. And that for the date segments. That way you can just let the two autistic people be themselves, and in that environment. It may be awkward, it may be stilted, it may be genuinely long pauses, but that's authentic. And so upon hearing that, I'm just every anger, just negative emotion I had just got replaced with I'm just sad. Like this is genuinely insulting, but more of a, not to the point where I'm upset or I'm just sad, because it's insincere. The execution, the music, the editing, like you all mentioned, and then like these autistic individuals, they're just like, I used the term circus sideshow freaks earlier because that's what they come across as. They come off as props and not human beings, and that's due to the show's editing and their direction and just how they're, like you said, the show talks down to these people, and that's not
okay.
Yeah, that's I'm not even like, I'm not to sound like a stereotypical parent, because I'm not even mad at the show anymore. I'm just disappointed because it's insincere, it's exploitative. I am insulted beyond belief as an autistic person. The few benefits the show does have are immediately overshadowed by the show's editing, by these scenarios they put these autistic people in, which comes off as so insincere, and it's sad.
I'm apt to agree. As again, not to go all the way into episode 2, but James's date also is, just to understand, the woman they paired him up with, she is higher functioning and more social and talkative in a way that makes the whole date kind of awkward.
Oh, really?
And I get that, like, you don't want to be like, oh, we're going to pair them off based on exactly their social skills or functionalities. It's a little gross. But at the same time, it also does feel like when they're all going on blind dates that the show is set up, the producer is set up, it's like, okay, it feels like you're actively setting him up for failure now, which makes it real gross feeling.
Yeah, like if
I won't get too much in episode 2. I just wanted to say that, but like that's also an issue with the Australian version of the show, where like they pair people off that would not be compatible or a good match, and then it's super duper awkward the whole date, and you're like, you intentionally put these people together knowing this would be bad. That's real bad.
Yeah.
Mean.
Yeah, we may talk. If you folks listening here want us to cover the Australian version, let us know down in the comment section below. But for now, yeah,
the Australian version, I'll admit, is a little more natural. The conversations feel a little less edited. Mm-hmm. There's still weird setups and awkward stuff, but it's definitely not so chopped up like the American version.
Yeah, just this chopped up, the music, the editing, it's just exploitative in instance. Yeah, the thing that really grinds my gear the most, the intent does not match the execution. And so
yeah, and I understand there's like some caveats and compromises you're going to make a reality show. Like there's got to be a camera in their faces. You can't shoot the show otherwise, which is always going to be awkward and weird. But there are things that the producers can change that would make everyone's experience on set more enjoyable. Mm-hmm. That would not damage the quality of the show. But instead, they're trying to min-max that drama reality TV factor in a way that feels real exploitative.
Yeah. Because there is a way you can do an autistic dating show or a documentary style show where you follow around autistic people and you follow their love lives. There is a way to do that. But the way but this isn't it. This is not how you do it. Like I mentioned earlier, you could do the hidden camera format for the actual dates. You could follow their journeys on how they find these dates. It feels so scripted. It feels so set up. It feels set up and not natural to the point where it isn't genuine, and which bleeds into making, as an autistic person, feel like these autistic people in the show are props. They are viewed as props and not as human beings, and that's what I think is the worst. I'm not even mad. I'm just sad and borderline insulted. So
yeah,
that's folks. Sorry to end this episode on a bit of a downer, but those are our genuine thoughts on the first episode of the American version of Love on the Spectrum. Again, if the demand is high enough, we will cover the Australian version. Please let us know. And my name is Mitch Grace. I am the author of the book Growing Up with Asperger's, Lessons Learned and Shareable Wisdom, available in paperback, available in audiobook format, and available in Kindle ebook format, available on Amazon right now. Links in the description. And I'm joined here, as always, by my co-host extraordinaire.
Thank you for having me on. And despite the sadder topic near the end, I had a good time and enjoyed this.
Yes, I love having these discussions with you, and we love sharing these discussions with all of you. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.